Welcome everyone. It's Angelo Robles. Those of you live, it's 4 o'clock Eastern on a Wednesday. A special guest, one of our most frequent guests, although it's been a while and it could not be any more timely. The AI scientist who called Nvidia early back. You should have listened. And the questions are very different this time. Now, I always have a hard time coming up with a great title for Craig because he's so multifaceted, not only a multi-decade thought leader in AI and a scientist in the world of AI, someone who's a retired hedge fund manager and understands the nuances of wealth, multi-generational family offices, tied in with being a really active investor. That is a rare combination, audience, and that could almost only mean it's only one guest, and that would be Craig Kaplan, founder and CEO of Superintelligence and IQ Company. Craig, how are you?
Angelo, great to be here, and I'm doing great. Good to see you again.
Excellent. It's a pleasure to have you back. Without further ado, we have a lot to cover in relatively, by Angelo standards, a short amount of time, not one of my 3 hours. I know those can be a little bit onerous. So here we go. It feels like since the summer, things were trucking along. There was competition among the AI LLMs. There was progress, Gemini 3 in November and other things. But I don't know, Craig, maybe it was me. February came and I almost wouldn't know where to start. Like, I guess it went like this, then like that. And we're really seeing a lot of things play out now in real time. We have so much to cover, including investments, including new advances. But I think for a lot of people, they're broadly familiar, usually with one model. Maybe it's OpenAI. If you could explain to the audience some of the advancements really in the last 2 to 3 weeks in Gemini, their 3.1 Pro, Claude Opus 4.6, Sonnet 4.6, GPT 5.4, Grok 4.2, and we didn't even get into the open weighted models yet. So if you don't mind going right into the fire, do a little bit of compare and contrast what has happened in the last month and what you like about each of the programs.
Okay, happy to do that. Before we dive into the weeds, I have a bias on this. This field is changing so quickly, as you point out, like week by week. You get new models, new companies even that come out. And I think it sort of makes people's heads spin. I mean, I've been in the field 40 years and it makes my head spin. And so what I find is useful is to sort of zoom out a little bit and understand the trajectory so that when these new announcements come out, you can kind of place them in a mental model. So if you don't mind, I'll take 30 seconds or 60 seconds to explain that trajectory, and then we can dive into the specific models and see where they fit on that. So the general trajectory, if we start with GPT launching in 2022 till now, you had large language models. Everyone was surprised at how capable they were. That's when AI burst into most people's awareness. And then the evolution has been from models where you interact with the model, question answer type thing, to agentic AI, where the model actually has some degree of autonomy. You equip it with tools. It can begin to take actions on your behalf. So that really kind of kicked in around 2025. It's going into hyperdrive already in the beginning of 2026. And where we're going, the next step after this, which you can begin to see the glimmers of it in some of the very latest offerings, which we'll talk about, is collective intelligence or a community of AIs. So you're going from a simple question answer type thing to an agent to communities of agents. This is the trajectory, sort of one step back. Where we are right now is kind of the rise of agentic AI and really going into hyperdrive. And what's coming and what's already beginning to happen a little bit is these communities. So if you kind of keep that in mind, then we can kind of locate these things. So if you think about Grok, because I know that you're a fan of Grok for financial services, and I don't use it probably as much as you do, but it is very good. It's arguably the best of the current crop in terms of financial services models. And if you say, why is it so good? Like Grok Heavy got the highest score on the toughest benchmark out there, which is called humanity's last exam. It's like a bunch of researchers came together and they said, what are the toughest problems that we can think of for humans or for any intelligent? And we're just going to put them down and then see how these things do. And so, getting a score of 30% was like amazing a year ago. And now it's beginning to inch up to the 50% level. Well, Grok Heavy, which is a version of Grok, currently has the record on that very toughest benchmark. But how does it have it? That's what's very interesting. The reason it has it, regular old Grok doesn't score that high. It doesn't have the record. But Grok Heavy, what it does is collective intelligence. It takes a bunch of models internally and it has them reason together in a group and argue with each other. And it's the consensus of that group of models in Grok Heavy that allows it to bump up and be smarter than any other model. So to me, somebody who's been, designing collective intelligence systems for, several decades, this is music to my ears. I'm like, okay, finally, people are catching up and figuring it out. But it's exactly on that path that we outlined, where first you get the model, then you get the agents, then you get the community of agents. You can already see Elon Musk, one of the smartest guys, been thinking about this for a little longer than some of the others, is beginning to build that into his models. So that might be a place to start. Certainly we could talk about Claude. We could talk about the other models if you want to go there. Happy to do it.
Yes, because I think for my audience and some of the master classes that I teach, that appears to be important. Usually the first foray is, or maybe more so in the past, has been OpenAI in terms of ChatGPT. And you brought up a good point. Everyone, this just burst on our scene a little over 3 years ago, November of 2022. So even if you're a little older like I am, even if you are a little bit behind because you didn't get into it a couple of years ago like I did, it is absolutely not too late. And those of you in investing in family offices, like this, like I wouldn't wait any longer. This is the time. So in general, maybe play off me a little bit, Craig, because I'm an active user 6 to 8 hours a day. I think the recent ChatGPT, because I was a little disappointed in ChatGPT since the summer, I think this version is more impressive. Overall, I thought Gemini 3 coming out in November, now 3.1 for deep reasoning, was very good. I think now you have, like I said, ChatGPT, the recent model, for certain things in recent sentiment, like you said, in financial. I do like Grok. But if I had to pick one overall, and I think definitively for writing, it's the diversity and the level of services that I get. There's so much within Anthropic's Claude series, Opus and Sonnet. Why don't I stop there and get a little back and forth with you, maybe what you like for what and why?
Okay. I think I probably largely agree with you. I think by reputation, the current version of Grok is probably the very best at math and financial stuff. For coding and writing, I think Claude, latest offerings from Anthropic, take the cake. They're probably number one there. For research and analysis, especially if it's more scientific subjects, and if it's multimodal, then it would be Gemini. And, there's reasons for all these, but I won't spend too much time. But if you think about the different companies that make these, like Gemini is made by Google, and all these models have to be trained on data. So you can kind of reason your way into why these rankings have arrived at where they are. So with Gemini, for example, good at multimodal. Why? They own YouTube. Think of all that training data that they have, right? They have a tremendous edge in visual information that they can use to train multimodal models. So unless they really mess up in some way, you would expect them to be able to do a little better than some of the others that don't have access to that data. And in the case of Grok with Elon Musk, what does he have? He has X, right? X is a huge, that acquisition in my mind, and I remember thinking it at the time, the reason I think he bought it, I don't know why he bought it, but the reason I think he should have bought it is because it's a huge source of training data in real time for models, right? And that's an edge. If you're doing financial services and you want the latest breaking news, where are you going to get it? If you have a feed that's coming in like X, that gives you a leg up compared to other folks. So sort of taking a step back and saying, here are the different companies, what data sources do they have access to, what kind of talent do they have, can help you sort of reason your way into, what they ought to be good at. and then you actually use it, and not surprisingly, it roughly shakes out that way. So I would say for coding and writing, Claude; for financial services and math, probably Grok; for multimodal research and analysis, and especially scientific things, I think Google Gemini. Those would be the top. And then, of course, you have Amazon has a model, IBM has models, many other companies. Mistral has a model, Meta has its models. So there's other people that have models, but I think the top three are probably those that are in different areas. Sort of one is a little better than the other.
And I promise, audience, we'll get into sovereign risk, multimodal, Mac minis, not multimodal, I'm sorry, open weighted, all that. It's coming. We have a lot to cover. There's one I didn't mention. They're not a pure LLM in the true sense of the word. They are a known brand, and they also had a massive announcement and development recently, and that would be Perplexity. Where do you like Perplexity, and have you experienced what they call Perplexity Computer?
I've used Perplexity before. I'm not sure I've used their very latest offering. Their strength traditionally, and if traditionally can mean like in the last year or two, has really been that they're very good at sort of citing their sources, which is an important thing. There's like a slight tangent we might go down, or we can explore this in more depth, but it's very important when you're using these models to realize, as I think most people do, that they can make mistakes. And oftentimes you don't really realize that unless you're an expert in the area. So for example, for family offices, if you have high stakes decisions, are you buying or selling stocks or analyzing a portfolio? If you have a senior financial analyst or portfolio manager looking at the output, my experience has been very often, even though the output looks beautiful and your first impression is, wow, that was so fast and this is amazing that it can do this. If you look at it carefully, oftentimes there's a mistake. I've had mistakes where it's telling me to buy instead of sell, and it's extremely confident about that until you say, well, what about this? And then it instantly changes its mind. Oh, you're right. I didn't think about that. And so what I found is to the layperson in fields that are outside your area of expertise, it's very difficult to tell. Is it giving me the right stuff, or is it making some things up? If it's in your area of expertise, an area where you have a lot of domain knowledge, that's where you can really sort of apply critical thinking and tease out when it might be making a mistake. And I think that's very important for people to be aware of.
Of course. And you mentioned, with Google and Gemini, their ability to decipher YouTube videos, like you said, the multimodal aspects, what they're doing in Notebook LM. If you really, again, put in the work, put in the time, very, very impressive. I would say don't get locked into one. Many of you start with ChatGPT, which I think has gotten better with the new release. You do need to experience, even if it's the free version, to really get everything out of Anthropic, and it gives you so much. Coding, building apps, you probably need to be at the $200 level. But again, what's the value that you're getting from it? A couple of quick points. And Perplexity Computer, by the way, I've been impressed by. But I do have a comment, and I noticed it even this morning in using Anthropic, and we're going to kick some models a little bit now, which relates a little bit to what you said. And maybe as an AI expert, you could explain this a little bit more. You're probably familiar with a little bit of the beef over name, which was with Claude and OpenClaw. And we're going to get to a little bit of OpenClaw a little bit later, but I went on Anthropic's Claudes to give me some feedback on OpenClaw, and it decided to give me nothing, no matter what I tried, because for a variety of reasons, Anthropic, Dario, and Claude don't really like OpenClaw. Therefore, they put in their bias. I want to be careful how I say the next one. But I did further research in discussions I'm doing regarding even the Epstein case, and Gemini gave me nothing. It basically, like, it didn't even acknowledge it exists, where other platforms, mainly Grok, were more open in the information that's out there. In other words, these systems are still, let's go with the word, programmed by humans. There's biases among them in these companies, which is why you should understand that and use a variety of different models to help get the best tactical information that you need to make a decision. Where am I wrong, and what has been some of your experiences?
Well, I think the last thing you said is absolutely the correct conclusion, which is, multiple models are going to be better than one. And because you have these biases, different companies and different models have been trained differently. So that's one source of the reason why one might tell you about something that another might not. It depends on what was in the training set of data that it saw when it was trained. But probably the bigger thing is the guardrailing that happens after the fact, where some companies very deliberately, do not want to opine about political issues or hot button issues and, potentially alienate half of their user base. And so they've sort of made a decision at the executive level that, let's just try to play this very safe, and we're going to have very strict guardrails, and we'll just simply, the model initially would answer all those questions. And then after the fact, they put on kind of restraints, right? Or restraining bolt. No, don't go there. When this type of question is asked, just say you can't answer it, or you're not allowed to answer it, or something like that. So it's a combination of the data that they've been trained with, as well as the guardrails that came on after the fact, that are sort of leading to that difference between models. And I think a good solution for the user, and I agree with your comment that it's at $200, $300 a month, it's dirt cheap compared to the value that you're getting. So you can actually afford to buy 2 or 3 of them and use the collective wisdom of the group to help you have some checks and balances there in terms of their responses.
And like I said, yes, audience, we're getting to open weighted a little bit later. And trust me, Craig knows a lot about investing. We're getting to that and the intersection of AI and within that. But I think it's important to lay some foundations here, what we're doing now. Gemini 3.1 Pro just posted a 77.1% on the ARC AGI-2, a benchmark specifically designed to test pure novel reasoning that models cannot memorize their way through. Maybe you want to get a little technical now, Craig. Does this relate to, is these AIs really LLMs just predicting the next letter and word? And is it starting to take it to another level? And is Gemini 3 with this 0.1 Pro on the cutting edge?
So here again, I think it's helpful to sort of take a step back and understand some general principles, so you can kind of, as news releases like that, like how something does on a benchmark comes out, you can kind of locate it in an overall mental model. So the initial large language models that we saw back in November of 2022, and probably for the next year, you could compare them to the kid at school who did well on the test by memorizing everything in the textbook and all the answers. And so then the test came and they basically regurgitated back the memorized answers, but they didn't necessarily have a deep understanding. There's a different kind of kid in school who maybe didn't study that much and isn't good at memorization, but sort of understood the deeper principles. And so when the test question came, even if they'd never seen the problem before, they could sort of reason their way, right? So you got mass memorization versus reasoning. In the early days of the last 5 years or 4 years here, 2022, 2023, what we were mostly seeing is mass memorization. So you found these models were scoring really well on things like, the California bar exam, or, different medical tests, right? Because a lot of those tests require memorization of case law, memorization of different formulas. And if you could memorize it all, then you could score well on those tests. And the problem is it didn't transfer very well to a lot of real world problems where maybe it's new in some way. And the answer isn't in the training data that you saw when the model was trained. And so what's it going to do? It doesn't have the answer. And so that led to sort of the rise of reasoning systems. Now, I say the rise of reasoning systems. Actually, reasoning systems came first in AI. From 1956 until 1985, it was all symbolic AI. Everything was reasoning systems. It's just that in the mid-1980s until 2022, something else took over. This machine learning, automated memorization approach gained dominance because computers got faster and faster. And all of a sudden, that approach worked way better. It was way faster to have the machine automatically memorize this stuff than it was for humans to program in specific rules that had reasoning built into them. And so there was kind of this switch from reasoning, which was very good in the beginning, to this mass memorization. And now it's coming full circle. It's like as the limits of mass memorization are reached, now we have to add reasoning back in. And that's when people talk about inference time compute, when they talk about reasoning models, all of that is saying we're starting with a base of a model that's memorized lots of stuff. And now we're going to add in some reasoning capabilities so it can deal with the stuff that it's never seen before. And so that's kind of the back and forth that's happened in the field, over the last 70 years or whatever. And it's happened a lot faster in the last 5 years. And now where we are is you get pretty good models on their own, a single individual large language model. You give it some tools and autonomy so it can become an agent. It can reason. And now the next step, what we're just beginning to see is, wow, these things are getting pretty good. Let's put a group of them together so that the group is even better than any individual. Back to your comment about not relying on any one model. Even if it's a single model, not relying on any one instantiation, but having multiple versions that are sort of trained on different types of specialized knowledge and then working together. That's what we're going to see more and more of this year, I think.
The cost of frontier AIs has collapsed simultaneously with the capabilities increasing. What cost hundreds of dollars per task like 3 years ago now could be cents. As a computer scientist and former hedge fund manager, how does that simultaneous dynamic, in other words, more capable and dramatically cheaper, have as a historical precedent in any technology cycle that you've studied?
So there's kind of two schools of thought on this. And I think we saw both schools of thought come out earlier, when there was that DeepSeek moment, right? And all of a sudden, Wall Street didn't know what to do with this. I had friends of mine calling me up and saying, should I sell Nvidia? Should I sell, does this mean it's the end of AI? Because, you don't need to spend $100 billion to train this. The Chinese little company just did it and it's almost as good. And they're claiming it was so much cheaper to train. And so there was this idea that there would be a collapse as the price came down. That would really cause a problem. The other school of thought was, no, what are you talking about? As the price comes down, usage is going to go up. It's kind of like we'll make it up in volume, right? That you've heard that before in business, I'm sure. But in this case, I think it's really true, because if you think about what AI is really, right? What is it? It's intelligence. Is it possible to have too much intelligence? I mean, if you have more intelligence, you can just do more things, right? And the cost of this intelligence, if it comes down, wow, you can use more and more of it. And it's hard to think that there's really a hard limit to how much intelligence you can apply, because everything that humans have created has come from intelligence. And it used to be very, very slow. And obviously things have accelerated since the Industrial Revolution and so forth. So we can just look back even over the last 200 years and see how much progress was enabled by higher and higher levels of intelligence. If you now have a source of this that is really cheap, instead of paying somebody $100 an hour, you're paying them 2 cents or 10 cents an hour or $1 an hour, and getting the same level of intelligence out. I mean, that's a bonanza waiting to happen. And I think there's essentially insatiable demand. The limits are not that people don't want to use more and more. The limits are how much can you produce? And that's based on going to be throttled by the number of chips that are available and the energy that's available and other factors at the moment anyway.
A little bit of we may be getting a little bit too deep in the weeds on this for some of the audience. We'll get through it pretty quick, but I think for some of my audience, they'll enjoy it. The labs are shipping frontier models, what feels like every couple of weeks. At what point, energy's behind it, chips, which could relate to the investment conversation upcoming, does velocity stop progress and start being more noise? Now, there's an important part two here. Important part two. 2017, I went to New York. I knew nothing about AI, but I knew about a gentleman at then not Meta, Facebook, called Jan LeCun. And he was kind enough to invite me over for like a 10-minute brief conversation. Again, I knew nothing about it then. It was well before ChatGPT. No question, Jan is very smart. He got a little bit ousted at Facebook with the new team that they brought in because they weren't happy with the progress. Let's be honest. He had no problem raising for $1 billion valuation in his new company. But after that long-winded buildup, Jan has been a little bit more putting the brakes on AI in the form that we currently know it, what it could be, where others appear to not be held within a box. I don't have the technical chops to know where Jan, looking back, may have been right and is going to be right in the future, or is wrong. It appears maybe a combination of both. And I know I'm putting you on a spot with someone who's quite a figurehead in the community, but that never stopped me before, Craig. So what's your opinion about that?
Yeah, so first of all, it's great you got a chance to meet with Jan. He's one of the top AI researchers in the world. And his expertise, as with Jeff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio and many of the other sort of luminaries in the field that are alive today, they really sort of excelled at the machine learning neural network form of AI, which is what that mass memorization was initially. And that was so AI is a big field, and there was a slice called machine learning, which most people today, they just think that's all of AI because they ChatGPT and these different things, they're all based on machine learning. And so they kind of are synonymous in people's mind. And so Jan LeCun was one of the pioneers in this area, very, very good at it. And in that field of machine learning, which led to ChatGPT, there is something called scaling laws. And scaling laws are really what's driving a lot of the investment. So it's kind of important probably for family offices and investors to understand this, even though it sounds technical, it's not that technical. It's kind of like Moore's law. Most people know Moore's law. It's not really a law. You know, Gordon Moore, there's no law that says number of transistors you can put on a chip doubles every 18 months. It's not a physical law of the universe like gravity or something. It's an observation that over time that seems to be happening. Similarly, scaling laws are like that. They're an observation that, wow, every time we double the amount of data and double the amount of, processing power that's applied to the data, so GPU chips, basically, we get faster chips, out comes a frontier model that's smarter than the last one. That's what the scaling laws say. And they show it very consistently. So you can almost predict, if I spend an extra 100 billion on data centers and I get this much more data, then my next model, you just draw the line and you say, it should be this much smarter than the last model. And this has gone on and on for several years. And there's a debate that's raging in the AI community about whether there's going to be a limit to it, right? I mean, most things have a limit at some point. So it usually doesn't go straight up. It sort of then asymptotes out, right? And so Jan LeCun, to paraphrase my understanding of his belief, is that we are reaching sort of those limits based on the current machine learning mechanism, the architecture, the way the algorithms work, where you just throw more chips at it, more data, use the same old algorithms, out comes very consistently a smarter model. He's saying those days are beginning to end. And what's needed is a new type of architecture that's not just the very narrow machine learning approach based on transformer models and neural network models that have gotten us so much action. Most of the tech companies, of course, prefer the simple formula of throw more money in, buy bigger data centers, smarter model comes out, make more money, right? It's easy. They don't have to think. They don't have to invent something new. It's nice and predictable. Jan's saying, he's one of the voices that says, maybe that's not the whole answer, and we need to start thinking about smarter ways to build these systems. I think he's probably right. And I think the evidence for that is that already people have realized you don't want just the smart model coming out of all that training from spending more money in the data center. You also want the model to be able to reason after the fact. It's called post-training or inference time reasoning. And that's essentially what Jan is saying, is we got to start looking at architectures that include things like reasoning and other ways to design these AIs that are not so reliant on this narrow thing that has worked well in the past. And so that's important, I think, for investors to understand the trajectory that I see, because I go all the way back, and I had one foot in the reasoning camp and one foot in the machine learning camp back in 1985, right? So like I got imprinted as a young graduate student with both methods. And so the fact that you need both is not surprising at all to me, because memorization is good for recognizing things and rapid answers, and reasoning is good for things you've never seen before. I mean, it seems obvious to me, and the field is just sort of realizing that. But as long as they could make as much progress and make a lot of money by just sticking with one thing, there wasn't too much incentive to change. Now, as people realize, oh, maybe there's some limits, like Jan's saying, now they're investing more in to add the reasoning back in, and that's what you're seeing.
We glossed over it a little bit about 10, 15 minutes ago, comparing the models and how February and early March have been incredible with some of the advances. The one thing that we didn't bring up, if you want to give context to the audience, happens to be million token context windows. So Anthropic was very limited in the past until February came along. And then for at least one of their models that changed. Gemini was always good with a huge quote unquote context window. Why is that important? And where can it maybe degrade quality and be a little bit of a negative?
Right. So the general issue is you have a large language model. It's trained on, let's say, the entire internet, and you can ask it questions and it will give you sort of the mediocre answer back from the average internet. If you want to get better than that, you want it to learn about your particular problem and maybe about you. And so as you interact with it more and more, it's remembering all that stuff. Or you want to put a bunch of your, PowerPoint presentations and annual reports and, family office documents, you can just dump them into that context window. And now the AI system, instead of just giving you back generic answers based on the average intelligence of the internet, it's sort of it's using that average intelligence and it's combining it with the specific documents and knowledge that you've put into its context window. So think of context window as a type of memory. And what's amazing, it truly is amazing. Like, humans do pretty well, but our memory, our short-term memory is very limited, 7 plus or minus 2 things. Like, you try to remember more digits than a phone number without repeating it to yourself, and you're very quickly out of memory. These things have working memory, like the stuff that humans would use to remember a phone number, that can hold War and Peace and, millions of, many, many documents that are really long, and they can hold it all in memory at once, which sort of makes you think, wow, they should be really smart. But humans have some other tricks that these systems haven't developed yet. But there is a limit to how much memory they can hold. Even a million token context window, I mean, you could put War and Peace and a bunch of PowerPoints, but you couldn't put the entire Library of Congress in there, right?
Right.
And you couldn't put all of IBM's, information in there. So the simple thing that people tried initially and has had good success is to just make the memory bigger and bigger, bigger. I mean, we didn't start with a million token context window. We started with like 10K, kind of like computers started with 5. Do you remember those days of 4K memory or something? And
of course,
right. And they got bigger and bigger. Well, it's the same here. The memory of the AIs got bigger. You do have a problem as you dump more and more stuff, then retrieval. How do you get to the right piece of information? There's so much stuff there. And you start getting into a different kind of issue of how do you sort of find the needle in the haystack of information that you've put in. And even with these huge memories, as you talk with them for a long time, I don't know if you've had any multi-hour conversations with some of your LLMs, there comes a point where it says, wow, I'm full. And then there's some clever ways, like it can compact your conversations and sort of distill it down. And then
or it wants more money from you.
More money. Well, there's that too. There's the business aspect. So that's basically the issue is, memory is a limited resource, even though these have memories that are far greater than the working memory of humans. Being able to retrieve the right information from that working memory is a challenge. And there's lots of ways to work around it. There's something called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where you can have the memory somewhere else. So it doesn't have to be in that working memory of a million tokens. So there's lots of different ways to address the problem. But the root question is, how much information can you stuff into the model? The more that you can stuff into the model where it can actually find the relevant information, the more intelligent its responses can be back to you, because it's not giving you generic stuff from the internet. It's now giving you that generic level of knowledge conditioned by all the unique information that you have put in.
So we now have multi-agent systems. We mentioned million plus token context windows, autonomous coding agents, all kind of landing and evolving so incredibly, really, in the last couple of weeks. Which one, through the remainder of this year, do you think will be most disruptive? And I don't know if I'd use the word overhyped, which one may be, but I will. Which one may be overhyped?
That's a tough question. I don't think I really know. This is changing so quickly. You could have one breakthrough at any one of these companies we've been talking about. If they have a breakthrough, they could sort of leap ahead. I'm much more confident about the general trajectory than I am about which company will be the one that sort of makes the next leap on that trajectory. The general trajectory is going to be towards more autonomy, more personalization, and groups of agents. That I feel very confident saying. But which company will get there first? We see it's neck and neck, and every week the rankings sort of change. If we had had this conversation a year ago, I think Gemini would have beat out Grok on financial services. I actually wrote a paper about the different models, and Gemini came closest to a real portfolio manager with a lot of expertise at that time. Now I think that's probably changed. So it's neck and neck. And I think the best thing that a user could do or a family office can do is don't get yourself locked into a single model. I think be an early adopter of a community approach of multiple models so that you can see which one is doing better at what, and then you can lean more on that one. And as the technology changes, you're not you accidentally hooked your wagon to the wrong horse, right?
And audience, I know some of you are asking for things like prompting. That's, trust me, beyond important. That's a little more for what I do with masterclasses, because there is both an art and a science to that. And correct, you could have a great program and you're not inputting really the right question or what you want from it, or it's too simplistic and not clear enough. You're going to be kind of disappointed in the result. There is an art to it. There is ways that I would recommend that I kind of say from my masterclass. And even then, you have to go back and forth. And I sometimes yell and scream at these LLMs. I'm still disappointed in certain outputs that I get, knowing that I'm a little bit of a master prompter and I know these things really well. So if you're not going to put in the time and the effort to learn how to somewhat master this, you're going to kind of give up and think it's a glorified search engine, which isn't half bad, but and inevitably it's going to have to go from chat, which is important, to doing things, which is what we hinted at with vibe coding, agents and swarms. And again, we have an hour and 15 minutes, so we can't, from the beginning, so we can't cover everything. I'm going to throw some curveballs and some unique questions upcoming that are going to take us in a little different direction, Craig. One of these I mentioned in a solo where I went on a rant a couple of days ago. I tend to do this, Dr. Kaplan. I heard in New York legislature, they were looking to pass a bill, and we're going to start to see more of this, where AI is going to be contained and controlled. Like, oh, no, it can't answer this question about mental health. It can't replace a teacher on this. It can't answer this legal question, this medical question. In other words, one or two constraints become 10, become 100. And here I am. I come from a very much a broken home, a working class family in New York. And for $0 to $20 a month, I have this amazing resource, and you, the government. Now, I admit I'm a hardcore libertarian, so of course you know the direction I'm going, Craig. But you, the government, are going to tell me what's good for me, what I should be listening to, and why can't I, for $20 a month at most, get incredible, broad legal and other guidance on this? Why do you want me to go to a $500 to $1,000 attorney that I can't afford? Like, they're protecting their turf. I hate it. And as you could tell in my voice, it makes me a little angry.
So, couple responses. There could definitely be some cynical motives protecting turf and so forth. So that, may well be true. But if we're extremely charitable and we leave that aside, and let's assume for a minute that it's coming from good intentions, they're worried about concerns and they're attempting to address them. I would say the intentions are very important and well-founded in that there are some serious dangers that most people are completely unaware of with AI. It isn't they aren't the ones that you mentioned where it's, don't get legal advice. Yes, you can get in trouble with those things. It's not even it's going to take my job. And it's not even the prejudice, which you can definitely have definite racial discrimination, all kinds of things with these models. Those are all valid concerns to varying degrees. The knee-jerk response that we're going to regulate it charitably is well-intentioned. Cynically, it's protecting turf. Either way, it's not going to do anything. It's at best a speed bump in my mind, even if it was the very best legislation. These models are evolving so quickly that they will rapidly outstrip human intelligence. And if you want to be worried about something, I think the correct thing to be worried about is what some of the top researchers, we mentioned Jan LeCun, so Jeff Hinton, known as the godfather of AI, basically says, this thing is akin to an alien intelligence that's going to arrive in 5 or 10 years on planet Earth that is far smarter than everybody on the planet. And most people don't even see it coming. If we saw an alien fleet coming, we'd be preparing right now of what we're going to do. But most people are just like, now let's just go make more money with this. And there are some real dangers in how these systems are designed and in really sort of what sort of values are they going to have. And so people talk about P-doom, the probability of doom. This is a serious thing among AI researchers. I know it sounds like science fiction, Terminator or whatever, but we're talking about the top researchers, the smartest guys in AI who've been doing this like 30, 40 years. All of them are worried about it. Even Jan LeCun, who's probably at least publicly, the least worried, he sort of poo-poos it. He won't say it's a zero risk, but most of the people like Jeff Hinton, it's 20%. It's like 1 in 5 chance it wipes everyone out. And so if you want to be worried about that as investors, such as Paul Tudor Jones, who maybe your listeners are familiar with, one of the top minds on Wall Street, excellent risk manager. Here's a guy who has gone publicly on CNBC multiple times saying, why are we not worried about this? He's talked to these people, right? He has the contacts and he has personal relationships with these. He's not an expert in AI, but he's an expert in risk management. And he says, any portfolio that I was managing that had a 20% chance of blowing up, I'd be doing something about it. Here's a technology that has a 20% chance of wiping everybody out and nobody's doing anything. He's baffled, right? And I'm with him. I'm baffled too. So I'm going to take 1 second to make a brief plug because there are people that are working on this that are very smart, along with Jeff Hinton, along with Yoshua Bengio. Stuart Russell is another name, and probably in the top 10 of living AI researchers. And I recently got back from Paris. I flew all the way to Paris to attend this conference that he put on called IA, International Association for Safe and Ethical AI, SEAI, IASEAI. And if your listeners want to do something about this, they should go to that site. He put on a gathering of 1,000 of the top AI researchers all over the world, international people that set the agenda for Davos in Switzerland, all the way to young researchers. And they all were unified on how do we tackle this problem. So there's a guy who's actually trying to solve the problem that matters. He's not necessarily trying to do it with regulation of the type that you're saying, but he is, putting all of his brain power and his energy. And believe me, he's got other things he'd rather be doing probably, because it's a lot of energy to organize and pull all this together. But he's doing it because he realizes the danger. And so he had Jeff Hinton speak and Yoshua Bengio speak. And it was really an excellent conference. So I very rarely give charitable contributions to an AI conference. I like to go and speak there. But this was one. I came out of that conference and I said, wow, this guy is making a difference. And so if you are concerned about something like that, that's sort of the direction that I would go. Okay, I won't. I'm not associated with him in any way other than just recognizing that here's a guy who's fighting the good fight.
I'm going to give you some pushback. We've had this discussion in some of our past interviews, and I hear what you're saying. In a perfect world, 100%. Even Elon Musk, he seems to vacillate between a 10 or 20% chance, like you said with Hinton, that it's all going to be over. So even he feels that way. Talk about a capitalist. My problem, and we've had this discussion before, is not that I don't agree, not that I don't have some concerns. My problem is the race to AI is it's gonna whatever country sovereignty dominates it first. Imagine China really gets there first. They could replicate practically any US company, dominate Western democracies and conglomerates. The moats come down. They do it for so much cheaper. They could dominate militarily, bioweaponry. What's going to happen to the future of energy and fusion energy? They get it first in manufacturing. What's going to happen with labor if they get a huge edge, which they probably already have on robotics? We will be demolished as a country because China doesn't give a you-know-what about the things that you mentioned. It's one person who's the domineering force that makes the decisions. You fall in line, and their goal is to dominate the world, in my opinion at least, and beat the US. And I think with all the issues we have here and the challenges that you're describing and guardrails, they may very well end up doing that in a long enough time frame. Now, I know we're diving into uncomfortable subjects, but nonetheless, I wanted to give you a little pushback on that. And I hear these very smart people in ivory towers, often left-leaning, quote unquote, professors. They're not living in the reality of the world and how it's evolving and changing. And yes, I think they're stuck a little bit in an ivy intellectual tower when in reality, we have to win, per my perspective, US and the West. I'm going to shut up. What do you have to say?
Well, you may be surprised, but I actually agree with you 100%. And but I have a twist. So let me give you the twist. So you and I have been in the business world. We've been on Wall Street, Silicon Valley. Look, I've spent my career a little bit initially in academia, but most of my working life has been dealing with venture capitalists, investors, hedge fund managers, as you said. So I am well aware that you have economic forces, and no one is going to slow down for the guy who raises their hand and say, can we please go slower because it might be safer? That's dead on arrival. Similarly, that's dead on arrival even for companies. Like Google can't slow down because OpenAI won't. Anthropic can't really. I mean, look at how much trouble they encountered just by saying, we just think this thing's too dangerous to let it be in charge of autonomously targeting things. I mean, they're totally right. You don't put this thing at its current state. You and I have used Claude, and you know you have to catch it at its mistake. You don't let it autonomously with no human in the loop target things. That's a disaster. The guy's just trying to say it's not ready for prime time, and the Pentagon's pushing back so much. So there's tremendous forces that say, let's go faster. If the US slows down, China won't, right? If Google slows down, OpenAI won't. So we understand that. So I agree. And the ivory tower guys don't understand that as well. But there's a twist. And the twist is you can have both. You can go faster. You can dominate. You can be more profitable, more powerful, and safer at the same time. And you have to look at the problem differently. And you know who's looking at the problem this way? Elon Musk. Let's go back to Grok Heavy. What is Grok Heavy doing? So there's no doubt that if it has the highest score on humanity's last exam, I mean, that exam was set up to say who's got the most powerful, intelligent model, right? And he's done it. But how did he do it? He did it by not building one super duper model. He did it by putting a bunch of models that work together in a collective, right? Collective intelligence of multiple models. That's actually an inherently safer approach. P-doom goes down when you do that. If you follow what Elon Musk did, if everybody did it, not only do you make more money and get there faster and have the better model, but safety increases. And let me explain very briefly why that's true. When you have multiple models working together, and this applies to family offices too, we've encouraged them to use multiple models because it's not the future of humanity at stake, but it's their portfolios. Your portfolio is at risk. If you use one model, that model is a black box. You don't know what it's thinking, and it's very difficult to predict what it's going to say. And if you blindly trust that with you or your client's money, you can have a very bad outcome that Paul Tudor Jones would say is unacceptable risk, right? So how do you deal with that? You have multiple models. Each one says something and it criticizes what the other models are doing. And so there's a transparency. Before it was a black box. Now with the community, you have transparency. Each model, when it's coming up with its ideas, it has to say them. When it says them, it's revealing what it's recommending. And if the ultimate answer is coming out of a whole bunch of deliberative models that are interacting with each other, and each time they interact with each other, it's visible what they're doing, all of a sudden, what used to be a black box is becoming more transparent. And transparent is safe. The more transparent it is, the safer it is. The more checks and balances you have, the safer it is. The more decentralized it is. So not one model has dictatorial control over your portfolio or over the human race, the safer it is. And that's purely architectural. That's just a design decision. That's saying, let's just design AI a different way. It's more powerful, it's more profitable, it's faster, and it's safer. So it's possible to have your cake and eat it too. It's kind of amazing. And you're beginning to see the smartest guys are figuring this out, like Elon Musk and the people, OpenClaw, the people who are building sort of agents that work together in communities. They're beginning to realize this. And that's going to be a good thing, not only for family offices and portfolio managers, but also for humans everywhere, I think. So I'm encouraged by that.
Well, thank you. That's great insight. Given your past as a hedge fund manager, and I'm assuming understanding the macro picture and the issues around AI, I'm going to ask you and only one question, but it's an important one. I did a 1 hour solo yesterday that was a little edgy and controversial. It's more of a big picture macro, and I am going to bring you into it, which you may regret. But I'm going to couch it in a way that is going to be very much around AI and investing. I promise.
Okay.
And that is what we're seeing play out in the Middle East. So my take, you want to say it's a hot take. Sure, does the US run a regime change? Yeah. Do they want to help the people that want quote unquote Western freedom? Sure. I think that's very arrogant to assume that and put yourself in people's culture. This war, from my perspective, as almost every war understanding history, really comes down to economics, money, oil, and effectively energy. What I mean by that is a variety of different things. Obviously, what we did in Venezuela did impact China. What we're doing here is already impacting the world, and let's see how it plays out. In other words, going back to what I said earlier, it's coming down to the US and China. Energy is going to be very important to AI, oil, oil, oil. Now it gets a little deeper. Iran attacked other countries in the Gulf, at least tactfully is a better word. And these are countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, putting in trillions of dollars into the US system of venture capital and AI. And now they're a little bit shaken. Maybe all the verbal commitments don't hold up. This appears to be very tactical from both sides, but to ignore the fact that this is probably mostly about oil, about energy, about AI is going to dominate the future. And it really is a battle to me. And please tell me where I'm wrong between the US and China. From my perspective, this is the main reason that we're seeing now. Please tell me I'm wrong or right or somewhere in the middle.
Okay. So, I mean, part of being good at something is knowing your limitations. So I am not an expert in geopolitics. I can validate certain parts of your thesis there.
Thank you.
So, but not from the geopolitics area, which is sort of, there are people far smarter than me at that. What I can say is that there is, I believe, truth in the idea that we are living in an age, and increasingly will be more in an age, where you can take energy and you can turn it into intelligence. So essentially the middle thing is the AI, right? So you have energy goes in and then it gets converted into tokens, which is sort of little chunks of intelligence that come out the other end. And so if you have more energy, you can have more intelligence, because these artificial intelligences, that's the fuel for them. They need energy in order to function. And what they produce is intelligence, and intelligence is power. Intelligence is economic profitability. It's all those things that it's always been. It used to come from humans, and the energy came from food. And now it's going to come from these artificial entities, and their food is energy, and it can be in the form of natural gas or solar or nuclear or oil or whatever it may be. That part of the thesis seems true to me. Now, whether that's driving the war and that sort of thing, I think it's a valid hypothesis, but I don't know whether it's correct or not. It's a reasonable hypothesis, I should say.
And Craig, please don't be so hard on yourself. I'm thinking of some of the geopolitical thought leaders: Mersheimer, Jeffrey Sachs, Ian Bremmer. Come on, you're more intelligent than them. They have a system that they use that has been working for decades. They're older, they're stuck in their ways. They do not understand AI. You're someone who straddles an AI scientific perspective, but also understanding macro and obviously investing, being a hedge fund manager. So Craig, everyone is being very modest. I'm going to ask you some other tough questions that are more investing related, although obviously that one absolutely directly and indirectly is. So I also went on a rant about 2 weeks ago where I spoke about within a reasonable time frame, but we're being a little optimistic. Let's call it 5 to 7 years. Is it possible that a company like Tesla, let's make the assumption SpaceX goes public, Optimus takes off, the markets go into a roar, everything is working here in the US. I know a little hard to believe, but let's imagine that. If these companies combined and we get a bit of a melt up in the markets, the radical statement, could that collective Elon entities, which is what, 5 or 6 of them, become the first $100 trillion company?
Well, let's see. I'll answer from my personal investment sort of point of view, I guess. So first of all, I don't bet against Elon. So I don't short him, and I own a little bit of Tesla, not a lot. And the reason I don't own more is purely from a portfolio management perspective, looking at sort of the price. It's very expensive, and you have a lot of key man risk. You have one person that's really almost synonymous with the company, and is also, he's brilliant, but he's one guy, right? So when I look out there at my choices of where to deploy capital, I like Elon. I think he's brilliant, and I like what he's doing. I just think it's too expensive for me to buy more. And I could be wrong about that. If it does become a $100 trillion company, then it's a bargain to buy it right now. But I look at I have to always evaluate. I could put $1 there, or I could put $1 somewhere else. And I have to say, I still like Nvidia better than almost anything I see, because I know they have an excellent CEO. I know it's an excellent company. And I see the line around the block for their product, and I see the moat that they have. And yeah, so they're kind of my gold standard. I look at every investment. I say, am I getting a better deal? Other than concentration risk, which of course, from a risk management point of view, you can't have too much in anything, even if it is your very favorite thing. You have to be wary. You could be wrong, but I'm constantly comparing my options. So short answer, yes, maybe. But I kind of adjust it compared to, the valuation at the moment, which for me personally is high, although I do own some.
And I had a a very popular guest on. He's co-host of the Moonshots podcast, incredibly intelligent, Dr. Alexander Wisner-Gross. That was about 2 weeks ago. And he did talk about some of the things that Elon talks about satellites, about space, about the moon, about data centers in space, inevitably Dyson swarms. And it was very intense for a traditional family office audience, meaning he threw a lot at them that, forget 20, 30 years. He's talking 3 to 5 years. Again, God forbid, nuclear war and things could go really wrong. So let's take them out of the picture. Things are going to be very, very different. If intelligence is increasing this much, probably passing what Einstein this year, and then exponentially growing from that. I'm not so sure that Wisner Gross is wrong. We could debate his timeline might be a little too soon. My big problem with it, big problem, too strong of a word, he might be underestimating. I hinted at this before with New York. Governments, corporations, institutions, they often move slow. They go by votes, people getting displaced, getting $10,000 a year. UBI is not going to cover it, although we could debate with massive deflation, debatable. But what I'm saying is, I think he's directionally accurate, and maybe he is right in 3 to 5 years, but I think there'll be forces at work that are going to slow it down. Sorry it was so long-winded, but what is your perspective?
I think it's a lot easier to see the trend than it is to sort of know the exact timeline. So the trend, and the reason that an accelerated timeline could be true, is that you have intelligent systems that will outstrip humans. And once they are autonomous, they can self-improve. And when you have humans out of the loop, right? So the thing that is the limiting factor on technological progress up until now is that humans have been driving it, and our brains only go so fast. You know, a neuron fires on order of 10 to 100 milliseconds. Okay. So that's as fast. It's like how fast the brain signals can go. You can only think, you know, maybe one thought a second, and it's probably not a very deep thought. Okay. But if you have an AI that can think a lifetime of human thoughts in 100 milliseconds, that's a game changer, right? I mean, the speed of thought. If you take humans out of it and just say, what has created everything that, you know, we love in our culture and technology and everything that humans have ever built, it's been human thought operating at one thought a second, or maybe one thought every, sometimes slower than that. But that's been chugging along, and the end result is where we are now. Now you drop in a new form of intelligence that does a lifetime in a second. And it's very, very hard to understand, you know, what that means in terms of progress. But in order for that to happen, the humans have to be sort of out of the loop. And from a safety and, you know, desiring humans to continue point of view, I hope humans stay in the loop as long as possible, working alongside the AIs. And there will be a time, in my view, it seems almost certain, that the humans will be out of the loop. And at that point, it's very, very important that those AIs and other intelligent entities have human values, positive human values, that during the period where the humans were in the loop, they managed to transfer not only their expertise, but also their positive values, so that this thing is living a lifetime in a second, but in service of things that are aligned or good for humans. That's kind of very important.
It's a beautiful answer. Of course, I agree, but I'm going to give a little bit of pushback. And we've had this discussion. It relates a little bit to a variation that I asked earlier. And I get it. People from out of the US are probably saying this about the US, but you can't tell me that very smart people, and Iran has a whole bunch of really smart engineers,
Yes.
North Korea, Russia, China. I know I'm angling the countries that we in the US don't have a great relationship with. I get it. So maybe I am blinded and in my own echo chamber. Those of you around the world, you could say that, and maybe I don't have much to say back to you, but you're wrong. But my big picture is it takes one person to not believe that and develop AI and bioweaponry that doesn't care about human life and value. Only one person they may not even need to be that smart in the future. They just have to be effectively evil. And that may come from somewhere here in the US as well. Craig, we're being a little Pollyanna. Like, what's going to stop that from happening?
Well, I don't think humans are going to be able to keep up with AI. So I think in the end game, you have to have AI with human values that are checking other AIs and bad actors. So just as in a democracy, the system itself has a certain robustness with respect to bad actors. It's obviously not perfect. In fact, it's incredibly flawed and very frustrating. And, you know, people would say the worst form of government except for all the others, right? So that's what you've got with a democracy, where you have checks and balances, but you have one set of entities checking other entities. And so far, humans have manage to not blow each other up. And despite having many bad actors. Now you say the stakes go higher, technology enables each human to be that much more powerful. So one bad actor could maybe devastate everybody else. But remember, technology's faster and more powerful for everybody else as well. So now the AI enabled human is sort of trying to operate and do something bad in an environment with millions of other AI enabled humans, or maybe just AIs that are going faster without the humans to serve as checks on that. So how that all plays out, it's a little bit scary. There's definitely risks there. Here's a thought that I'd like to share along these lines, because oftentimes it comes up, humans, are not doing such a great job. Look at all the war, look at all the oppression, look at all the bad things humans are doing in the world. How can we possibly expect that when you amplify that with AI that we have a good outcome? And that leads to a very pessimistic conclusion. But I want you to consider that despite all the flaws of humans, the number of humans that die each year from war and violent conflict as a percentage of the population is about 0.03%, less than 1/10 of 1%. The current risk, according to Hinton and other people, of runaway AI with no human values is 10 to 20%. I would love to have the risk be 1/10 of 1%. And all you need to do that is design it differently so that you have millions of AIs working together in checks and balances, just reflecting everyday human values that exist right now. Most of our values, we forget this, are positive, pro-social. There's a little camera, Angelo, following you or me throughout the day. Yeah, we might cut somebody off or do something bad, but most of our actions would be positive. And I don't think either of us has probably killed anybody or done anything really horrible. It's a very small percentage of human behavior. And the outrage that all of us feel about that is so strong that I would think an AI that's objectively looking at human behavior and what's accepted, what's not, what causes outrage, would come to the conclusion that this is not the right set of values. And so I think there is hope there, but I think you're right also to push back and to try to avoid Pollyanna views and to be as realistic as possible, because a lot's at stake here.
And by the way, audience interaction on YouTube, a little hard for me to see some of the names. I see you, Charles. Yes, I'm having a cigar later. No whiskey today. Primal Key, great question. Craig already answered. Fascia, you're some great comments. I'm just not going to be able to get to everything, and some of it is flowing in. I would like to talk about something that popularized really just a month ago. Again, amazing, although it's been around a notch longer. It came into the forefront, and the founder is now a bigwig at one of the big frontier models, but that would be OpenClaw, a company that I briefly mentioned earlier, being effectively kind of with a Mac Mini for a couple of $100, an open weighted model effectively for free. I could be sovereign on my own computer, protecting my IP, not touching the cloud like more of the traditional non-open weighted frontier models. This OpenClaw is getting a lot of traction. And again, some vulnerabilities, security challenges. But Craig, it's all happening so quick. We could do an hour or two on this. I still have 3 or 4 more questions, but why don't we give it a little bit of attention and love? Because I think it's worth it.
Sure. So I'll locate it on that map that we talked about. So where does OpenClaw fit? It fits in AI agents. Essentially, that's what it is. It's a personalized assistant that can take actions on your behalf. It can send emails. It can organize your email. It can basically, it's an AI that's been equipped with tools and a level of autonomy. And as much autonomy as you're willing to give it, it can do a lot of things that a normal assistant would otherwise do. And it does it extremely cheaply. And as you said, you can run it sort of on your own computer and you don't have to worry about your data leaking. There are some security concerns. But the way I think of that is that's great. That's an evolutionary step. That's where we're going. I mean, it's just right on the main trend, which is you're going to see more and more. I don't know if it will last, longer than 3 months, or if in, 2 years, it'll be bigger than OpenAI. It's hard to evaluate how these things go. But what I can tell you is that trend of having personalized assistants and agents that are more and more personalized for you, that are acting on your behalf, that absolutely is going to continue. And this is the latest example of it. There have been half a dozen, or probably half a dozen that I know, but probably dozens and dozens of other versions that didn't get the viral takeoff that OpenClaw did, but that are out there. And some of the big companies had Agent Builder and, Claude Project and all these other different things. There was Crew AI. This one is the one of the moment that has captured the imagination because it's easy to use, it's open source, and it's the hot thing of the day, right? And I wish them well, and I think it's going in the right direction.
And audience, I got a couple of more questions for Craig. And I would have liked to have done a deeper dive into sovereign, which we just hinted at there, meaning open-weighted models that never touch the cloud. If I'm a family office, I protect my own data. Yes, they're more limiting, but if I'm building it in a limited matter, the fact that it doesn't need to have the level of broad intelligence, and Quen and DeepSeek are doing some very interesting things. Llama, I hope an American company will one day catch up relative to that. But yes, as I think an entrepreneur and a family office, you better understand what open weighted models are, how to use them, how to download them, using things like OpenClaw as well, understanding Mac minis. We just don't have time to do a deeper dive into that. So that gets lost a little bit on the cutting room floor. More agent swarms do as well. But maybe one question a little bit related to that. And one of the questions or comments in the comment section hinted at this as well. Craig, like we are here right now where if I got a little bit of an intelligence and gumption and a creative mind, and maybe you could argue a little bit of capital for a really good Mac Mini or series of them, I could create a company from hundreds to thousands of these. Putting this together, being an entrepreneur, we are absolutely going to see singular person, quote unquote, billion-dollar companies, multi-billion-dollar companies. And come on, Craig, we're heading to, there's going to be effectively zero person. These are going to now that may require fiduciary legal issues aboard. Let's throw that complexity a little out the window for a second. We are obviously trending there. How am I going to compete as an entrepreneur in 5 or 7 years when the machines are just going to be so much smarter and can work 168 hours a week? And sadly, I can't.
Yes, well, it's a good question. I think there's an evolution. So what we're seeing is right now, the entry-level jobs are extremely vulnerable, right? So if you're somebody who's a young person and just graduated college, unfortunately, you don't have a lot of life experience and maturity, and you just haven't seen a lot of business situations. You know just what you learned in your classes, right? Which is the latest stuff. But that kind of knowledge is easy to replace with even the large language models that exist now. If you're a coder, for example, in computer science, I mean, Claude Code is going to run circles around you. Unfortunately, I see it at my own company. We have some entry-level guys, and I feel bad because, the way all of us, Angelo, you and I, we were probably mentored and we learned. We had senior people that helped us, and over time we learned. And it took us 10 years or something to get to a certain level of expertise. And now that whole entry-level swath for many, many jobs is going to be sort of out of the box replaceable by these AIs. At the moment, however, there is a premium on the senior level because just like you use Claude or whatever your AI is to look at your portfolio, if you're a senior person who knows the right questions to ask and who can think critically and can spot the mistakes, which the younger person would not know because they haven't been in the business long enough to do that, the senior person is supercharged, right? They're able to do what you said. They're able to, start a company much easier because instead of having to hire and recruit all those junior level people to sort of do the basic jobs, they can use AI to do that. And as long as they have the expertise and experience in their area, they should be turbocharged to do it. Eventually, for most things, and can't give you the exact timeline, AI will catch up little by little to the senior people too. And eventually it will be very difficult to compete with it at all. And in my view, at that point, we better make sure that it has human aligned values because we're not going to be able to control it or compete with it. we have to work with it and we have to hope that it cares about us. And so the time to sort of design systems that maximize the transfer of human values into AI is now, while we have this window. And when that window closes, it's kind of like raising a child. You've done your best job on parenthood, and now you cross your fingers that you did a good job because that kid is out there doing their own thing and you really don't have control anymore. You have to let them go. And it's kind of the same. I think we're going to all live through this.
Let's try to go a little rapid fire. I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm taking some advantage, but the audience is really enjoying it, Craig. Again, February was amazing. Seedance. Let's put a little bit of the investment spin on it. Maybe not even as much what you think about it. We all know that poof, in what seconds in a prompt, it created the most realistic on a bridge fight scene between what Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. Now, yes, limited to what, 10 seconds so that you could start to string them together. What I'm getting at is what's going to happen to Hollywood? What's going to happen to Netflix? Like moats are dissolving, jobs are dissolving. This is not going to go back. That cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, there's going to be disruption across a whole lot of industries. To try to, I guess the way I think of it, I usually look for principles because things are changing so fast. Unless I have some sort of basic principles to help me reason through these things, it's very hard to know, and it's hard to know anyway. So cognitive tasks. So I go back to what are these systems and what are they good at? They're good at cognitive tasks. They used to be good at memorization and sort of regurgitation of things they've seen. And now they're good at cognitive tasks that require multi-step serial reasoning. They're getting better and better at multimodal. That means anything that's visual. They're getting better and better at creating visuals and at recognizing visuals. So you just kind of on a case-by-case basis, if you're trying to invest in a company and you want to know, is this going to be disrupted, or is it going to be AI as an additive thing that makes it better, or is it something that wipes it out? You kind of have to think about what is the cognitive activity? What is the thinking activity that happens in that business? Is it a business that's based on human relationships? Well, maybe people don't have a human relationship with an AI, and you're going to need those people because they really want to have the beer or the cigar and whiskey with you or whatever. And that's very important. Or maybe it's healthcare workers, and you need a human there until people become comfortable with a robot instead of the humans, and the robots aren't here yet. But if it's a purely intellectual task like coding is one of the purest intellectual tasks there is because it's just following a set of rules, and the AI can follow that set of rules way faster than a human can. So it's one of the first things to get disrupted, right? And so you kind of have to reason that way on a case-by-case basis to each of these industries, whether it's, Hollywood or healthcare or whatever. Ask yourself, what is the cognitive activity involved? What data is needed? What experience is needed to do well in this particular business? And then sort of take your best sort of reasoning as to how AI might affect that.
Let's maybe go 30-second hot takes. You're more of a public markets investor. We've done this before. You already hinted at you're still on Nvidia, but maybe give a little bit of because I'm going to ask you about a couple of companies. We'll try to keep them around 30 seconds each. Your thesis on Nvidia.
Okay. And just a 10-second disclaimer, not investment advice. This is for me personally, and I'll tell you why it works for me. So Nvidia, my top pick. I have my largest allocation in Nvidia. It's been that way for several years. I try very hard to ignore the day-to-day noise and look at the main trends and see if anything has changed. So the main things with Nvidia, it still has its moat. It still has a really good CEO. They are generations ahead of everybody else, and there's a line for chips around the door. And it's a bonus that there's so much uncertainty and noise in the market that the price, it's trading cheap compared to what it was before. So all those things make me very excited about it, and I continue to hold it as my largest position.
Meta.
So the thing there is Jan LeCun's out, as you said, and we have Alexander Wang is in. So Alexander Wang, smart guy, used to run Scale AI, and that was a business where you had lots and lots of humans doing the testing on AI systems. He's now in charge of the superintelligence, which, should be something I know about since superintelligence.com is the site I founded many years ago. They also, in the last couple of earnings calls, have mentioned personalized superintelligence, which is right on the roadmap of where I think we're going. So I believe their intention and their direction is very, very good from where I sit. They have lots of data, which I like. You got Zuckerberg, who controls the stock and is a founder and is a smart guy and a good track record. So I like that. Although, ethics, I would like there to be strong ethics as well. So I'm generally positive. I definitely have a large position in them, but there's execution risk. Alexander Wang, there's a big bet going on, and you don't know if the guy's going to execute and his new department's going to execute. And there's also internal tensions. And so that's my biggest thing. I think what they're trying to do is right. And if they succeed, it will be a very good payoff. But can they execute? I can't tell it quite yet. So that's why it's not as high up as Nvidia or Alphabet, which I also like.
We're not going to go through every company in either the Max 7 or the top 30, but I will point out a couple of others. Amazon.
Amazon, I mean, I don't actually own any right now. I have owned it in the past. Andrew Jassy, smart guy. You got the cloud service. That cloud service has got to do well. I guess I miss Bezos. That's really what it comes down to. I thought Bezos was the innovator. He was willing to plant a whole bunch of seeds and grow the orchard. I feel like Andrew Jassy is more a guy who's going to squeeze the lemons and get the juice out. I mean, you can make money both ways, but I just prefer the person who plants the innovative seeds. So it's maybe more of a personal preference.
Palantir.
I don't own any Palantir. And for me, it's because of ethical reasons. I don't like what they're doing with Department of Defense. And I also think if I leave ethics aside, they're very expensive. I'm not a value investor, but I just compare the PE I have to pay there to the PE on Nvidia. And I say, is the guy really better than Jensen? And I'm like, no, he's not. And I'm paying a way higher PE, so I don't own it.
And I mean, those are all big names that everyone's going to know. You must look at things relative around exponential tech and AI. And again, the stack goes down from energy plays we could debate to even a company like Corning that is making glass and components that go into this. What are a little bit more under the radar companies, even one or two that you're looking at? And again, people do their own thesis and make their own decisions.
Let me answer that by giving people, instead of giving you a fish, I'll give you how to fish here. In the area that I feel like I have strong expertise, which is AI, I'm not an expert in energy. I'm not an expert in copper or commodities or things like that. So there may be many opportunities there, but I don't know them. So I always go to my strongest thing where I have an informational advantage, I feel. And that is the AI companies themselves and the chip companies. So there's three pillars. It's going to be compute, it's going to be data, and it's going to be talent. Those are the three things I look at. So if I go to any company like Alphabet, for example, I'd say, okay, what do they have in data? They got YouTube, they got every Google search that's ever been done. That's a huge data advantage. That's a check. Then I say, what about their talent? They've been working on AI since way before it was cool, right? So they have lots of talent. Now, some of it's left, but they still have pretty good talent.
Like Demis Hassabis, who's incredible.
That guy's amazing, right? And they've got some good talent that they brought on. And also they have, the founders were very good. So they've got the talent. And then, the compute, well, they're building their own chips. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. So the main risk there is, can they execute? Because they tend to have in the past been somewhat bureaucratic, but recently they seem to have gotten their act together. So I really like them. But that's how I analyze it. I look at those things. Nvidia, I mean, they're awesome on compute, right? They've got the best chip out there by far. And that's one of the three pillars. Data, I don't know if they have much data. So they're going to, they're going to be used by somebody else who has the data. And algorithms, they have smart researchers, but not as good. But they're also doing open source. They're doing all kinds of things. He's so visionary. So the talent part, I give him 5 stars for being a very talented CEO. And he's my same age and he's been in business as long as I have. And for him to keep going the way he's going and have that vision is truly impressive, I would say.
Indeed. Some of the comments coming in, okay, you forced me to ask any specific thesis on Intel.
You know, there's a lot of politics involved in that. Who would have thought that the federal government,
I
I
wonder
mean,
why.
right? So those things always, I always am more comfortable because I have no control or inside knowledge about what the government may or may not do. So I like to base it on, you know, kind of first principles of just long lasting competitive advantage. Intel's been lagging for a long time. I do like that they have a new leader. So that's good. I have looked at it, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet, partly because it rocketed up after they got sort of the federal investment. I like Nvidia took a stake in them, but I can't tell why they did that, whether there was some behind the scenes deal or whether it was a pure arm's length kind of thing. So I've just been in a wait and see and watch mode on Intel.
And two combined kind of rapid fire. Given that my audience, my core focus, my membership community is based on single family offices, and to me, they're still behind on implementation and even the investing side. What tip or recommendation on maybe the usage and operational side and thinking through investments? Now, of course, Craig, on the usage and operational side, coming to one of Angelo's AI masterclasses is obviously the best thing that they could do. But other than that, what tip would you have there and maybe investment direction or guidance?
Okay, so two things. So on the usage operational, the single best thing someone can do, if they're not using large language models, they should use them. And if they're using one, they should diversify out and use three and see what the difference is. That would be the first thing. Don't be afraid of it. Just embrace it and have fun with it. Play with it. Don't let it run your portfolio, but don't be afraid to try. That's number one. And number two on that front is think of it as an intern. If you had an intern that come in, you're not going to turn your portfolio over to the intern. You're going to supervise them. But this is a really bright intern. Interns sometimes come up with good ideas. So don't close yourself to the possibility that they might come up with a good idea, but you have to be highly critical. I've hired a lot of interns from, master's programs and everything. And some of them were extremely confident and felt like they knew the right answer, and they completely were wrong. And those were the scary ones. And AI is a little bit like that because it comes off very, very confident. It's like the intern that doesn't know what he or she doesn't know. And so therefore you have to be hyper vigilant on that. At the same time, they can add value and you should be playing with it for sure. So that's on the usage piece. On the investment side, we've talked about those three pillars. I think that's my best advice there. A second piece of, I don't know if it's advice. It's not really advice because it's not financial advice. Thoughts, I should say. A second thought for investors is think about if there is going to be widespread adoption and it's going to be in the corporate sector as opposed to individuals, although it applies to individuals a little bit. Data is one of the pillars. So who's going to help manage the data? What are the companies that are going to help companies that have all that data? Which companies are going to help get that data into a place where AI can use it? That's kind of what Palantir does to a certain degree. It's part of what they do. There's lots of other data companies out there. I think that's an area that I would be investigating to figure out which of those sort of maybe have a leg up.
And maybe 10-second thesis AMD.
AMD. It's like Avis. Remember when it was Hertz and Avis? We try harder. That's my view on AMD. And I like Lisa Su. She's great. But look, I mean, I love Stacy Ragson. If you want a good analyst on semiconductors, Stacy Ragson is really good. And, he's like, look, they're making progress. They're growing their revenue and everything, but it's still kind of rounding error compared to what NVIDIA is doing. So, yes, it's good for diversification if you want to have a second chip player. But again, if you look at the PEs and you say, which would I rather hold? If I only could buy one, I would go for NVIDIA probably, personally.
And a closing comment question from me that I would love this is a little philosophical. I can't help it. I mean, really think about this, Craig. I'm sure you thought about it before, and I mentioned this on some of my solos. For billions of years, we've had sunshine, oil, sand. Look what comes from sand, and metals in the earth. Humans, as we know them, what about Homo sapiens about 200,000 years?
Yeah.
And right now we're at that point in history where what makes up our world, sand, metals, the sunshine from the sun, and oil is converting, that you hinted at before. This is converting effectively energy into intelligence. It's pretty amazing when you think about it that way.
It is. I agree. When you step back and think about it, this is like the most exciting time I could imagine being alive, and the changes that are going on. It really is a unique point in all of human history. And I don't think it's because we're just living here and we're short-sighted. I think if you take the long view, you really can see an inflection point that has never occurred before. So what an exciting time, and definitely important to get educated on it, as you have mentioned to your viewers there.
And Craig, tell us a little bit in closing, then I'll do a brief wrap. You own superintelligence.com. What a great URL. What does that mean to you, and what are you looking to accomplish with it?
So I see the evolution of AI from narrow AI, which was very good at certain things like chess, to general AI that can solve any cognitive problem. We're working on that. We're getting closer with agentic AI, and then community of agents. All of that, I think, leads to sort of AI systems that are as good as the human. And then very, very rapidly, I don't think you stay there very long, almost a matter of weeks or months, you go from as good as the average human to sort of better than the best human, because these systems can self-improve. And that is super intelligence. So we already have narrow super intelligence, like the AI programs that exist today are better than the world champion at chess. They're better at folding proteins than any human alive. They're better at certain specific tasks. But super intelligence of the kind that I'm interested in, artificial super intelligence, is general, better than humans at any task. And that is coming. And so superintelligence.com, I've been working on this a long time. I got that domain name in 2006, which was, I think, 8 years before Nick Bostrom wrote a book called Superintelligence. And my main focus is to try to help people understand that there are design decisions that are very important, that can influence whether it's safer or less safe. And just like what Wall Street people do, you try to shift the odds in your favor. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to adopt designs that are safer. They can be profitable. They can be faster. They can make you more competitive. In fact, they need to do all those things. I 100% agree with you, Angelo, that you have to have those things, but you should also be smart about how you design it so that it's also safer. And if we do that, that greatly increases the chances that this is really an age of prosperity for everybody, and that it doesn't go off the rails. I think that's the most likely case. But as Paul Tudor Jones would say, 10, 20% chance of the thing blowing up, that's way too high. So I'm with him on that. Let's get the risk down. So just do a little management of the tail risk. Otherwise, the portfolio is looking good. That's how I'd leave it.
Excellent, Craig. And again, everyone, it's great to have Dr. Craig Kaplan on. I recommend following him on social, having an understanding of what he's doing by going to superintelligence.com. He's been a wonderful guest and one of those multi-decade entrepreneurs, AI scientists with the chops from a technical perspective, but also an investor. What a tremendous combination. It's always a pleasure once or twice a year to have him on. Everyone, we got some new people in the audience. I'm Angelo Robles, a veteran, but that makes me feel old. I don't know if I like that. In the family office community, founder of Family Office Association, exit a couple of years ago, active allocator, investor, enjoying my social media profiles, but I love what I do within the family office community. So founded another more intimate private intelligence and strategy community called SFO Continuity, kind of my private membership community, which you can learn more about at angelorobles.com. Again, angelorobles.com, and learn more. Follow me on socials. I'm pretty active, especially at Family Office on YouTube, but most of the platforms, LinkedIn as well, and others. And if you're watching this live or newly recorded, next week, beginning March 16th, I'm off to Palm Beach, Florida. We have a program, my marquee program, that I host over 4 days, beginning Monday the 16th through the 19th, at some of the best locations in Palm Beach, with an incredible roster of speakers, including obviously in AI and geopolitics. We are going to go deep. It's going to be incredible. And we have, most importantly, forget even me and the thought leaders, just peers, incredible investors and people that want to make a change. I'm not looking for people to be in my echo chamber and only agree with me. I want people to fight back, to battle back, to disagree with me on multiple things, including political and geopolitical. I think that's where we learn, where iron sharpens iron. And as new information comes in, I could adapt my opinion. I don't want to get anchored. So having incredible investors and families, a very good number of them, together over multiple days, that's what membership provides and the value. Now, if you're also watching this live tomorrow, meaning Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern, I do have my final interview until meeting in my digital platform until I'm back from about 8 or 9 days in Palm Beach. And I haven't covered this subject comprehensively in a long time. We have V. Polis on, World of Women, incredible entrepreneur in Web3, tokenization, and NFTs. When was the last time you heard me mention that? And she knows, she was also in the hedge fund industry, traditional finance. So she segues kind of the future of Web3, where it interacts with AI, but also understanding traditional investing people and family offices as well. So that's 11 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, meaning Thursday. If you're watching this in a recording, well, then just go to my @family office on YouTube and you can watch it there. So everyone, this went a little longer than I wanted. Craig was very generous with his time. It's always tremendous to have him on. Again, go to superintelligence.com. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I appreciate you. Thank you all so much. And some of you, I will see you in Florida, in Palm Beach next week. It'll be a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you, Craig Kaplan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angelo. It was a pleasure to talk with you again.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, everyone.